Hi, welcome back, and today we're going to be talking about another of the 8 sensory systems, one of the, again, lesser known ones that we don't necessarily learn about as we go through school. So today we're going to be talking about the vestibular system. Now, the receptors for the vestibular system are basically hair cells in 2 structures which are based in the inner ear. These structures help us to understand about the movement and position of our head in space. The vestibular system helps us with our ongoing control of our eye and our head movements. It fixes the eyes as the head and body move so that the eyes are not moving alongside. And it influences muscle tone, and therefore it helps us with our ongoing postural adjustment. So these tiny adjustments that we're making all the time. And it also provides us a perception of motion and a real spatial orientation, so where we are in the world at any given time. So what does this mean? Well, it means that we can stay upright against gravity. If we don't have an issue with it, we don't tend to be thinking about gravity, but we live on planet Earth and we have gravity and we need to be able to stay upright. We don't fall down when we move. So as soon as we start moving, we are orientated, we know where we are, we understand the speed at which we're moving, we understand and can orientate to the movements of others as well. And we're not disorientated when we tilt our head or move our head or look down. We don't feel dizzy, we don't feel sick, and we know where we are and we don't fall over. So we know what we need it for. So what happens when it is not working efficiently and effectively? So we have a few things that can happen. So the first thing is gravitational insecurity. And this is a primal fear, so a subconscious fear or response to changes in head position. And when I say a primal fear, it is an absolute perception that the person is falling and that gravity is pulling them down. Remember, we talked about gravity before. I had a young lady who was 13 and very eloquent in being able to describe what it felt like. It's very difficult for us to know what it feels like, but when she tipped her head at all, she felt that she was being pulled down to the floor. So she did most of her tasks with her hands here so that she could still see her hands, but she didn't have to tip her head forward. And she was suffering from significant anxiety and was being treated for her anxiety. And nothing was working for her anxiety, but that's because there was what we'd say a bottom-up reason for the anxiety, that it was being triggered. Her fight or flight response was being triggered anytime she had to move her head. We can also have vestibular modulation difficulties, and the first one is where you have an aversive response, so an over response to movement, and particularly avoidance of rotational movement, angular movement, and which causes a lot of difficulty just moving about normal play activities that children might participate in, anything that involves significant movement. So you might find that there is a real avoidance of movement in that case. And again, there's high anxiety in this area, and the behaviour may well be quite extreme, as in sad or angry, or just shut down. It looks like a shutdown, but actually it's an avoidance. And thirdly, we have a vestibular modulation difficulty where we have decreased sensation, so an under response to the movement that's happening. So, and also distinguishing the quality of the movement. So we have difficulty distinguishing small rapid movements, and we need these to help us with our balance reactions, with our posture, judging force and direction. So we're going to display all of those difficulties. But we also might be, if we're under responsive and we're not registering movement input well, have a sensory seeking pattern to our behaviour. So the brain is not registering, so it's seeking more. And so for us, if we were to rotate, so on a roundabout or spin around, we would get dizzy very quickly. A young person who's not registering, or an adult who's not registering that input, they're likely to continue to rock, to spin, to rotate on a roundabout, jump on a trampoline continuously without feeling the effects of that. And really, we have a switch that says that that's enough, that we've registered enough, we don't need any more information, we're about to become overwhelmed. And in this case, that is not happening, and therefore can look like hyperactive type behaviour. But as I say, you can also have clumsy type behaviours, judging force and direction poorly. Strategies for vestibular processing are not as simple as the proprioception that we've talked about earlier. Proprioception is relatively safe, and you can overdo it, but it's less likely that the young person, adult, is going to be overwhelmed with the input that you provide. Vestibular is more difficult, and we really need to understand which part of that vestibular sense is not working properly, so that the type of difficulty that's there. And that might not be very easy without the help of an occupational therapist, somebody who understands sensory integration. So if you think that your young person, adult, is really struggling with movement and is very fearful, it's very difficult to treat that because of the huge anxiety. So that has to be done very, very carefully. If you have a child, young person, adult who is under responsive to vestibular, so they're the ones who are seeking that kind of movement all the time, that's slightly easier. It's not to say that you stop them from doing those seeking movements, but what you want to do is to have some start and stop in there. So if they're jump, 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 you want to maybe do 10 jumps and stop, and an abrupt stop, so that the brain is registering that input, and also the proprioception input from that is forcing the vestibular information through. It's really important that they're getting the intensity that they require, but it is not continual. And in the I suppose the basic rules are that if you're trying to calm, you would do more rhythmical, slow movements, and if you're trying to increase that sensation in, you would do faster but non-rhythmical type movements, and that's start and stop. But you have to be really careful because the effects of vestibular input can be seen hours later. So they might go into overwhelm or shut down. So you have to do this very, very slowly. And it is best to consult a therapist with regards to vestibular information. However, if you have noticed that they have a fear or an avoidance of movement, then that's your best start, particularly when you are moving them, if they are being hoisted, if they're being pushed in a wheelchair and you're bumping down a curb, or you're got a tilt in space that they're not coping with, and using the hoist, how secure is that hoist? Is there a lot of swinging about? Are they not coping with that, or do they absolutely love that? How can you incorporate that? So it's just starting to think about where some of those behaviours might come from if A, they are over responsive to vestibular, and B, under responsive. So two different types of behaviour that might help you to understand where they're coming from. Okay, thanks, and we will see you in our next journey of the next sensory system. Bye.